How's it going, YouTube? Coming in today with another video, and today, guys, the video is going to be the board breaker tier list post Alin. Now, this is going to be extremely important because we have so much support and new cards coming out in Alin that it's going to be imperative that you really know what board breakers are going to be the best. And then if you don't know which hand traps are the best, definitely go back and watch my hand trap tier list so you know exactly which ones to play of both. I do think, as always, this is going to be another format where you play a little bit of both because both are going to be really effective, where some formats only one or the other are the better ones. But right now, I still feel like it's going to be a couple board breakers and a couple hand traps that are going to be really impactful into the format. If you haven't already checked out my sponsors, definitely go ahead and do so, all down below in the description, and pick up my new Blue Eyes mat if you haven't already over on Imperium Duelist. Now, without further ado, let's hop right into our board breaker tier list. The first one I'm going to bring up is going to be Lava Golem and Smear Mode collectively. A lot of times you can talk about them in a separate sense, but for the most part, they're going to be very similar. And I would say that these kind of just rotated out. They're really good cards in their own regards, but having normal summons right now just feels really important, and there's not many decks that can really afford to lose their normal summon at the moment, so I would say more than ever right now, it's just not going to be the best time to run these. They were really good back in like cash format and what have you, just because you didn't really need your normal summon if you're summoning cash cards, right? So that's another thing where these cards are not going to be your best friend at the moment. Same thing with kaijus, honestly. Like, kaijus aren't really outing anything that's problematic, because the only thing you're realistically outing with a kaiju right now is Detonator, and then Eclipse Twins will just bring it back. So it's not really accomplishing anything. So like the tribute cards aren't necessarily the greatest right now. The only one that you might get away with right now is like Kurakara. And I think Kurakara is one of the crazier hand traps that you could have. And it's like hand trap, but it's like a board breaker, right? And this card is so unique because when it falls out of a format, no one expects it. No one's going to try to play around it, right? So that's where a card like this goes just completely gone in a format for formats, and then you use it, and all of a sudden you're catching everyone off guard. So I think that a really interesting choice for Rhode Island right now could just be using Kurakara. And side note, I didn't mention this in my Weird Hand Trap video, but Ghost Ogre on Accode, when it tries to bring cards back from the grave, really good. So definitely consider that too. I guess it's like a pseudo board break as well, because like Ogre being a hand trap that destroys something can also be viewed as a board breaker the same way a Gamma could. So definitely a very interesting interaction with that. But I do like Kurakara right now. I think that it's a very interesting card and something that you should consider. Another card that I would consider to be very tier 2 right now is going to be Change of Heart. And that's the same as Minecon, of course. It's just not very good to be just trying to like target and steal people's monsters at the moment, just because most boards are layered in Eruption, where this is really good when formats are just kind of like build a board, right? And then you're just like cracking a board. But if it's like 2 or 3 layers of interruption that you're going to have to play through, one Change of Heart isn't really going to make a big difference at all. So that's something that I just wouldn't play right now. I would say that it has application if the format does open up pretty wide, to where you can just go ahead and play cards like this and just try to steal something off a board. So that's why I'd put it in like tier 2, because it's always a pretty respectable card, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's something that I would want to play right now. So it could just be down and don't, but I do think that it's always at a level where there is a chance that it could be good enough. Regeki is a pretty okay card outside of the Ryzeal matchup, because again, Detonator just protecting everything. But if you have like double Regeki, I suppose, right? But even then they have Eclipse Twins, so it's like worse. But it's always going to be a card that you kind of want to look out for, because it can still be pretty detrimental in a matchup. So something that you definitely want to consider, but not something that you're always going to want to play, especially because if you're not playing like Tenpai, it's not a very good card to have around, where you could just have the better cards. And honestly, like tier 0, Harpies is always a great card, right? Your opponents are on Cross on the main, Called by, they're siding into Solemn Strikes. You're dealing with so many different options in the back row right now that Duster is just always going to be a fantastic card, and you realistically should have this in your side 100% of the time. I did not include Thrust today, because that's always going to be an avenue to get to a board breaker, but you should be on Thrust as well right now. It should be like 2 Thrust and 1 Duster mandatory in the side right now. I think that's just fantastic. And then Lightning Storm, just a little lower. It's still a fantastic card. You want to play it, but at the end of the day, Duster will always be in tier 0 for me, at least right now, because the card is always going to be a fantastic option. Now, something that's not always a fantastic option is going to be evenly matched. I think that this is a card where, again, you can catch someone off guard, especially if Memento becomes a lot more popular. This is a card that can absolutely decimate that matchup, and it's really tough for them to play through it. So that's something where you can definitely consider evenly. I like this card a lot. When you do activate it and it's a crazy card in the matchup, it's one of the best things that you can have. When it's really lackluster, it's extremely lackluster. So definitely consider that as an option, but it's something that might not pan out too well, but it could. Now, for this format alone, and I've never really loved this card, I definitely would put Metaltronus as the absolute top part of Tier 2, just because I would put Ultimate Slayer in Tier 1. I think this format alone is going to be a much better format for the Ulti Slayer than it will be for Metaltronus. Now, will people still run one or the other regardless? Absolutely. But I just want to be able to showcase here that I definitely prefer Ulti Slayer over Metaltronus, and having like a mirror logic in your extra deck. There's just going to be a lot of things going on right now that you want to make sure that you can go ahead and avoid. If there is a decent target that you can find for like reptiles to deal with things like the Ameno, definitely go ahead and run the Metaltronus. I think that's fine. But I'm just not a huge fan of it. I also don't like the fact that Malice is going to be the best deck and everyone's going to be running Impulse. So not only do you have to worry about like Ash on the Metaltronus, you also have to worry about Impulse on Metaltronus, which is tough. And then a lot of boards are making Caesar because Fiendsmith is super popular right now. So that's something where having this is just always going to be a lot less optimal than like an Ulti Slayer. Of course, a lot of people are still going to run Metaltronus, and there's nothing that's really going to change that, but I do prefer Ulti Slayer, and I want you to know that. Droplet is always going to be a very unique card for what it can provide in a matchup, but I definitely prefer this in certain decks that have a lot of cards that prefer to go to the graveyard. So if you're playing something like Crystron, this card is almost always tier 0. I will put it in tier 1 because I feel like Droplet is always in and out of a format, and when it's in the format, the card's absolutely broken. It's so good. But it's been a little lackluster lately, but there are going to be a lot of times where Droplet will shine. And again, cards that activate in the damage step are pretty fire. So that's something where you want to make sure that you have that as an option moving forward. Now, of course, nothing's actually going to beat the best board breaker in the game, even as a 1-of. Again, you should be on 2 thrust in the side, so this is technically a 3-of. Talon is still one of those cards where if you activate a card effect in the main phase and your opponent goes slam Talent, you're just like, that sucks so bad, you know? Like, it always just feels awful. So, definitely a tier 0 card. I would always play Talent. It's always at least a 1-of in the main deck. You should be on this card if you want to do well in future events. Even as a 1-off, it is still going to be one of the most absolutely crazy cards that you can have at most situations. Now, the next one here is going to be Fenrir. I really do like this card still. I like Unicorn more right now, but this is definitely still just like a tier 2 card. It is a lot of pressure on a board when you're going into one. You go summon Fenrir, and then your opponent's just like, oh god, like we have to deal with that immediately, right? So that's something where it does apply a lot of pressure. It can be viewed as a board breaker just because of the effect of it as well. Just to be able to call battle and then target something, force something out, which is always going to be really phenomenal. Unfortunately, right now, Pinkertops is kind of just in the don't area, which is weird because his card's always fantastic and it's at 3. But if I was going to play one or the other right now, it's definitely just Fenrir. Because even if you summon Fenrir and go Fenrir effect to search, if they pop it, you're like, okay. But a lot of times they're not going to pop it because you're just going to summon another one. So they're just going to leave it and you're just going to search. And then you call battle. Then they have to deal with it. And then you just go slam Unicorn, right? So definitely a really cool card right now where I feel like Destruction is very lackluster at the moment. Again, especially if you're playing against things like the Memento deck or like Ryziel, where Destruction doesn't really do a whole lot right now. Book of Eclipse, it's somewhere in the middle of tier 2, still a very good card, but there are play rounds for it, unfortunately, and of course, just like Ash, which does suck. But even Book of Moon, I feel like both of them are like mid-tier 2 as far as a board breaker goes, because they're like really impactful until they're not. But sometimes a well-timed Book of Eclipse can still change the entire course of a game. Now, the last 3 are unfortunately just kind of in the don't tier. I don't like any of these right now. I don't think any of them are very strong. The Shaddoll package is just too many cards to commit, especially if you're trying to play something like Fiendsmith, which is already enough cards to commit. Super Poly, the same thing. If you're not already playing Super Poly targets like in Tier, you shouldn't be playing this card. It also just doesn't do enough right now into the format. And then Dark Ruler definitely doesn't do enough into the format right now, just because there's so many boards with layered interruption. So this is where I'm at right now with board breakers. I always try to go top 5 from this, top 5 from like the hand trap tier list, and then use both in my lists just to make sure that I have coverage for everything. And that's something that's really truly special about deck building and something to consider. And you can always try these options, take them out, rotate other things in just to see what works and what doesn't. But this is where I'm at with board breaks, and I hope that you enjoyed today's video. And if you did, definitely leave a like, comment below, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.